He looked at me, handed me a hammer, and said, "Hit it." And I said, "But it's a Lambo." He said, "Hit it."
You've had, I guess, a few run-ins with Horacio. What is he like in person?
Their lightweight wiring harness is all one color.
Oh,
Every single wire.
Just curious, do you have to drop the motor to change the belt on a Ferrari? Oh.
And it comes down to, it's already had 4 timing belt services in its life, maybe more.
In 30,000 miles. Is there do you get paid more if you work for higher end
So that's also...
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of REVlogue. I have a really good friend, Eric, who has some good experiences working for higher end manufacturers like Lamborghini, Ferrari, and Pagani. So we'll be hearing some interesting stories from him. But before we begin, I have another interview story like this with a designer from Hyundai. So if you haven't watched that video yet, I'll make sure to put that up on the link over here. So check out that video. There's a lot of good information, especially if you're interested in design of car designs. So yeah, check that video out. But for today, we're gonna go all crazy into the mechanics of the cars and some crazy stories. I know you've been also racing with Ferrari and stuff like this. So yeah, let's. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, what your experiences are?
Okay. I started my career working on Volkswagens, among other things. I worked at a Volkswagen dealer for a couple of years. Decided I wanted to move down to Southern California. That was from upstate California in San Jose. Came down here. I met a guy who owned an independent shop. Exotic cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis mostly. He loved the fact that I had Volkswagen experience because, Volkswagens are essentially big Lamborghinis, if you will. And from there, it kind of just spiraled out of my control and kind of just fell into place. And, I've worked for Ferrari dealers. We did the Scuderia Corsa. I was on their EMSA team. Raced a lot of different series, 24-hour races, 12-hour races, endurance races.
So you were traveling with the Ferrari team, basically?
Yep. So I was what they call like a stand-in. I worked at the dealer mostly, doing street cars and such.
Yeah.
When they needed an extra hand, they gave me a call and said, "Hey, come to Atlanta. We need you for the weekend." So it was fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah.
When you're there, it's miserable, time-consuming work, but looking back, it was a blast. It was an experience. 24 hours Daytona, that was something crazy. We were, I think, awake for like 48 hours straight. But we got the job done. The car finished, so that was a plus. Yeah. But overall, from Ferrari, I got a phone call. They wanted me to work at Pagani when we were opening up a new location. I was able to essentially design my dream shop and kind of work directly with the manufacturer in our standalone store. Okay, so
you were part of the beginning phase when they were figuring out how to set up the shop, essentially.
So we had an empty warehouse, and they basically said, "We want a shop in here, but it has to meet, brand identity and essentially look like a Pagani facility would look."
Gotcha.
So that was a fun experience. I essentially designed my dream shop. Yeah.
So actually, one of the questions that one of the subscribers asked was what Horacio Pagani is like in person. So I guess we'll get to that more in detail. But so I guess we already talked about how you got your start, and I guess one of the questions that I really want to ask is, what's the biggest difference between a regular car? I don't want to say regular, but generalizing, a regular car and an exotic. What do you think? What do you see as the biggest difference?
So overall, I get that question a lot.
Yeah.
My usual go-to answer is a car is a car.
Yeah. Well, that's because you're a good mechanic.
At the end of the day, everything's got a battery, everything's got a starter, everything's got 4 wheels and tires. Nice. The way things are built, it's a lot more in depth. They're not, puzzle pieces. A lot of these higher end cars are hand built. So it's not, oh, it'll fit perfectly. You kind of have to make things work. Also, there's not a lot of information out, even from manufacturers. They're even very selective of what they'd like to share with you. It's kind of a need-to-know basis.
Okay.
If you need to know something, they'll provide you with the information, but you can't just find it a lot of the times.
Interesting. So it's not just like written on a manual, basically.
I mean, there are manuals, but keep in mind most of them are being translated from Italian or another language, and translations aren't always great.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. So you were saying you get a lot of questions regarding the mechanics of the car, but is there do you get paid more if you work for higher end?
So that's also a very big topic that people ask.
Yeah.
Essentially when you look down at it, you can make just as much money at your regular Toyota dealer or Volkswagen dealer. The hours, flat rate is a big conversational piece in the automotive technical side.
Sure.
Flat rate's a system where I get paid off hours that I produce.
Okay.
So you as a customer would be paying, 4 hours for an oil change. Well, if I can do that oil change in 2 hours, I'm still getting paid 4 hours.
Yeah.
You're still paying 4 hours. I was just productive, and I did it in less time.
Yes.
Now I can still go on and do more hours. So, from a lot of these smaller manufacturers, an oil change, like at Toyota, it's like an hour. Well, I can knock out an oil change, 25 minutes.
Sure.
Well, I could do 10 oil changes that day.
Yeah.
Make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Whereas on the exotic side is that oil change might take 8 hours. And those 8 hours are roughly 6.5 if you're really trying to rush through it.
So you're not exaggerating about the 8-hour thing.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people get, it's so expensive to maintain them. Well, it's not really. Labor rates are usually cheaper, but you're paying more labor. So yes, it's kind of there. Whereas, your standard mechanic at a Toyota or Volkswagen can flag, still 80 hours of pay period or whatnot. Well, so can I on the exotics. So it's kind of a give and take.
Okay.
The potential to make more and hourly wage rates are usually a little higher on the exotic side.
Okay,
though.
so it is a tad bit higher, but it's not like an exorbitant amount, like a Corolla to like a Lamborghini kind of thing.
Exactly. It kind of balances out. I mean, obviously, more exotic cars, the value will go up a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a catch-22.
Okay. Actually, that's a perfect segue into the next question. Is maybe not the wage difference, but like what you said 8 hours of oil change, like. What makes them so difficult or labor intensive to work on? Like, do they have like a contest to make them more hard, like make them harder to work on, or like?
So essentially, they don't really want your average consumer to be, changing the oil on a 458.
Okay.
It's labor intensive. You have to remove the belly pans. It's a dry sump system on some of these cars, so you have to drain the engine pan itself and the engine tanks.
Okay.
Or the oil tanks, excuse me. Essentially, it's just labor intensive.
Okay.
You can't just crawl up under there and drain the oil. You gotta put work into getting to the drain pumps.
Right. I mean, for most of the cars that have the wet sump, you're not taking that crazy high G's where you'll be starving the oil, right? And so I guess that's part of the oil change ritual is that you have more aerodynamic like under panels to remove, so that's probably a little bit of labor there. And then again, the dry sump lubrication and all this other complicated stuff for the sake of being a sports car, right? So
on top of that, like 458, for example, gets about 10 quarts of oil.
It's just a lot of oil then.
So exactly. It's got time consuming to drain, time consuming to fill. Not that that's adds up crazy, but overall, there's other checks once the ban is down that we're going to do as well on the car. Now that we can see everything's exposed, you want to give the car a whole once over, if you will.
Gotcha. And this is another subscriber question. I mean, it sounds like a simple question, but there's kind of a depth to it. I thought about actually asking you this, if I'm going to ask it or not, but it's a subscriber question, so.
Of course.
So the question is, what actually makes them, other than the complications of parts and the way they're designed, like, why are they so expensive to work on, or to, especially like if you were to replace a part or something? Like, is there, obviously the raw material cost is higher, but are there any other reasons what make them so expensive?
A lot of times parts are, engineered in Italy. Availability is difficult to get. Sometimes it's not uncommon for things to be on back order for 6-8 months.
Wow.
That's extreme circumstances.
Okay.
I have had to tell people, sorry, I can't fix your car. I don't know when I'll be able to fix your car. Which, as you can imagine, is not a very pleasant story to have to tell somebody.
I see.
But overall, I mean, they're engineered from thousands of hours of research.
Yeah,
Everything comes down to, it's a race car for the street.
Yeah.
You put, as an enthusiast, you yourself have put tons of money into your car. It's same aspect. They've already done that R&D and put those parts on that, are better than, figuratively better than the latter.
I mean, there's like crazy things. Like, I heard the Porsche Pasm is like essentially kind of like rubbing your suspension with like a sandpaper. So like every time you're using it, you're like essentially wearing out the orifices. So the intervals are much shorter, right? Like, it's you mentioned that because it's like a race part, like they're kind of essentially designed to break or for maximum performance, or?
So they're definitely not built for longevity. Okay. They're built for the highest level of performance that can be used out of said part. So, like you said, the shock absorbers, they're gripping on that shaft, so it essentially performs better. It doesn't bounce as much. Well, preventing it from not bouncing as much, there's a win and lose. Okay. It's going to last not as long.
Gotcha. Because, I mean, your average consumer is probably looking to use the shocks for 100,000 miles? It's probably the usual time period.
Most of these cars barely get that high. There are several people that do enjoy them. Here in Southern California, people do get to drive them quite a bit more than elsewhere around the world. But, I make this joke, most of these cars very rarely see 10,000 miles. Even, 20, 30-year-old Ferraris, we're looking at 30,000 miles as high mileage for some of them.
Wow.
And it comes down to, it's already had 4 timing belt services in its life, maybe more.
In 30,000 miles.
Exactly. Ferrari made a transition to chains, so the older cars have belts. They did have 2 separate systems, so they essentially 2 different timing belts, and they're rubber, so they deteriorate. Especially if they're not being used. The garage queen that sits there
so that's
for
part of it.
A month or 2 without being started or driven. The rubbers, the seals, everything deteriorates.
Okay.
So, in a perfect world, you'd say that 30,000 mile car is probably better than that 1,200 mile car.
Because it actually had some maintenance done.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, just curious, do you have to drop the motor to change the belt on a Ferrari?
Some. It